You are now listening to the Going North podcast, where you'll receive tips and techniques to advance yourself. I'm your host, Dom Brightman, and every week we're going to be hearing from an author who's going to share their expertise to help you charge forward in life. On a quick side note, be sure to check out Going North the book. It's available in ebook, audio, as well as paperback form for those who love to read a traditional book. Now let's get on with the show. Today on the Going North podcast, where we interview fabulous authors all over the world, today we have a Wonder Woman on the podcast. This author right here is not only an award-winning and best-selling author, but if we took all of her awards that are listed and manifested them into gold medals, she would outnumber Michael Phelps. Because this wonderful lady right here, she is not only an author, she's also a doctor and the president of her own company called Infinite Light Publishing, a small company that focuses on books of mythology, folklore, and tales designed to make a positive difference to humanity and the living planet. And you're probably wondering who this amazing and very creative and sensational woman is. It's the one, the only, Dr. Ayn Cates Sullivan. How are you today, ma'am?
I'm great. It's so good to be on your show. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Excited to have you get to add another interview to your ever-growing highlight reel, and you're an inspirational woman who's gathering up all these stories and putting them into print.
I've been having so much fun. I think mostly I've just been having a lot of fun.
That's good. That's the part people need to remember. Got to be fun on the bun.
It's got to be. It's got to be. You know, my grandfather. We all. It's so great when you have a lot of relatives growing up, because they always give you something that you remember. And my grandfather said he was very successful. He was a very, very successful businessman, and he loved to jump up in the morning and go to work. And I always wondered about that, like, why do you love to jump up in the morning and go to work? First of all, he owned his own company, but he said, just make sure that whatever you decide to do, it doesn't matter what it is, but just make sure you really love it. So you really do want to jump up in the morning and you want to keep going. So I've really kept that close to my heart. And my feet, the feet keep going.
Now, that's a new quote you should probably put on Instagram one day. It's like, yeah, you got to wake up and make sure it's close to your heart and your feet, so that way your feet keep moving. Tap dance your way to work, huh?
That's it.
Yes, ma'am, indeed. We had a short, wonderful conversation earlier, and the wonderful part about it is you're out in the DMV area, Virginia specifically, and you have this wonderful home that's been around for over 400-plus years.
Well, we have in the family a legacy farm, and the story is, and I'm still trying to find all the paperwork, I'll say in advance, but according to, I actually did the Ancestry.com, and it all does line up. So I think there's truth here. It was a land grant given in 1668, and there's one to the Amos family, one to the Foresters, and they became the Fosters when they came here. And so yes, we still have that farm. It's a wildlife preserve now, and it's just magical to go and walk on it. And I have to say, I think it was my grandmother's fault. I called her Nana, that I got into all of this, because I would sit in her kitchen and she would stir her soup and she would tell me stories of the Knights of Northumbria, and two of the guys were buried in the backyard. So there was
wow.
There were skeletons there, so we knew something was real. And so I was just so fascinated by this, and wanted to find out more. So I was lucky. And got a fellowship to partial fellowship to Columbia, and then went up to and got a overseas research award to King's College London. And what my job was actually was to find to go through the folklore of Lady Gregory and her plays and so forth, and to bring some more wisdom to her. Now, Lady Gregory is not very well known. But she was the patron of a very well-known poet named W.B. Yeats, who's one of the most famous poets of Ireland. And once upon a time, when they had their own currency, before the EU, he was on the notes. But anyway, so my job was to go collect folklore and to learn about the lady behind the Irish literary renaissance. And she's a great person even for this day and age. She's such an incredible character because she knew that in order to keep a nation alive, that you need the stories of your people. You need your own language. You need your own. Now, obviously, we want to have a global perspective too. We want to see, what is special about all of humanity. But for some place like Ireland that had been so abused, that had been through so many difficulties, she felt it was important for the Irish to understand their own culture. And so she was behind reinstating Irish in the schools instead of, as well as English, but to bring the Irish culture back. And, up until the Easter uprising, you would get killed for, speaking Gaelic and for telling some of these tales. So it's fairly recent that we've been able to go back and really look at them. My husband's an O'Sullivan, so I actually walk the Trail of Tears. There's a Native American Trail of Tears in the United States. There's a Irish Trail of Tears in the west of Ireland, as those kings were killed off. But anyway, in gathering those tales, what I found out was that in the Celtic tradition, there are solar goddesses, which means that they're goddesses that aren't necessarily reflecting the light of the masculine. They shine in their own right. And so I started to learn a lot about their views of the equality between the sexes that I thought was very powerful and important. Some of the original stories were considered history. They're now considered myths. But one particular one that's fun is the story of Caesar, who was the granddaughter of Noah. And she was in the wrong lineage. She was in the lineage of Cain and Abel, so she was not allowed to board the ark. And
wow!
So if you're, from the wrong side of the tracks, what do you do? Because she was switched on. She knew a flood was coming, and she said, "Well, heck, I'll just build my own ark." So she built her own ark, and she put 50 of her friends on it, and her herd of horses, and in the tale, the storm comes and the boat spins out into the ocean and it swirls for days and days, and then at a certain point she throws the light of her heart out across the ocean and asks someone to save them and bring them safely home. And it's the goddess of Ireland who is called Eru, who grabs her light and brings her safely to the shores of Ireland. So in old history, Caesar was the first person, a woman, to set foot on the Irish shore. So it's a lovely story.
Oh yeah, yes it did. That's pretty interesting though. It's like you always hear about Noah and his big ark with all the animals, or at least all the clean and unclean ones, but you never hear about the other arcs that might have existed. I guess she was probably the only other one with an ark.
I don't know. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many people built an ark?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
But what I love about her is her willpower. She wants to succeed no matter what, and so. I just like, at certain points in life where things seem difficult, it's just great to tap into that nature. Okay, I'm going to throw the light of my heart out towards my goal, towards what I'm seeking, And I know if I really, really want this, that someone will respond to my prayer, my request.
And your name actually means light, right? At least Ayn, right?
Yes, it does. It means the light. It does. Both in Hebrew, which is interesting, because she would have been, she would have been from the Middle East. But also in the Celtic tradition, there's Ayn or Anya, who's the solar goddess, and Anya it's spelled Aine, but she's a very ancient. Sometimes she's also Anu, but she's one of the very oldest of the goddesses in that tradition. And there's actually something lovely. There's the Paps of Anu, or these little hills, or these naked hills that are in the south of Ireland, southwest. And in one tradition, they used to build these little chimneys on each Pap, and they would light her nipples in the springtime to invite the nourishment of the land. I thought that was really great. You want to wake her up and invite her in.
Spring into action, huh?
Yeah, definitely. Spring. It's like spring and summer's here. Let's get this fertility thing happening. So it's so much fun, and I think, as I was going through and collecting these things, I with all the wild earth changes that are going on the planet, you think, gosh, if we really spent some time and checked into some of these indigenous practices, like, the Celts or the indigenous Europeans, and we have Native Americans, we have all kinds of different, the Mayan priests, indigenous people everywhere, the Aborigines in Australia. They're really tapped in to the earth and how it's moving. And I think when you go to some of the old stone circles and some of these old places, you get this sense of, oh yeah, things are changing. It's not the end of the world, but it's going to be different. And one of the practices we did that was really interesting was in Wales, where we went to Bryn Celyn Du. I'm probably not saying it right. These Welsh names are incredible, but it's on the Isle of Anglesey, and it's something like Bryn Celyn. I think it's Bryn Celyn Sea, where you actually crawl into these old stone circles, and some of them have earth on top. So they maybe once upon a time had a tree growing through it, but then the earth was put over top, so you feel like you're going into a cave. And some of them are like they're called long barrows, which is where they were like mausoleums where they buried people. And then some of them would be where you would go. They're ancient temples that you go into, and some were dedicated to the feminine, specifically the feminine. And what you would do is you would crawl in, and you'd put your back up against the stone. And there were certain times of years where it was said to be more powerful. You could do it any time that you needed to, but let's say, around Halloween time, which they call Samhain, you would crawl in and you would put your back up against the stones, and you would call on your ancestors, and you would call on the earth herself to show you the dreams of the world and what was going to happen and how you could play a part in the beauty and unfoldment of what was happening on the earth. So the great heroes and heroines of the time would go and do that. It would be the hero or heroine's journey. That's really a heroine's journey, when you actually go inside a dark place and you sit and you listen. You're not slaying the dragon, You're actually listening. How can I help? How can I be of service? What is my life purpose and mission? Why am I here right now? Oh, and if you're lucky, in your meditation or your conscious dreaming, you might get a flash or an insight. Oh, I see. This is how it's supposed to unfold. Isn't that lovely?
That is beautiful indeed, and it's kind of fitting you mention that in this time of where meditation and just deep inner thinking is a lot more widely accepted than it has probably in ever, in this country especially.
Well, for the past 5,000 years anyway, I think there were some goddess traditions that were pretty rough before. Well, Christianity changed things for better and for worse. For better in that a lot of the stories were recorded, and the written word really spread, and things. We have a lot more. I think we read and we communicate more because of this, and also the idea that each individual is important and each individual matters was spread during that time. But I think we also lost things, and so going back and looking, re-examining history and seeing what we left behind and maybe what we need to bring forward again so that things balance again, I think is important. And that's what I was doing. I was digging. You find all kinds of things when you dig. Mud, dirt, rocks.
You're like, yeah, I found some gold too. All right, this digging is over.
And that's it. You find a lot of mud, and then somewhere in there's this diamond, and you're like, oh, wow, that's beautiful. What this little special insight, this little awareness that you come back with that sustains you. That's like, oh gosh. And I think there's something powerful. I take people sometimes on heroine's quests, hero's quests too. Sometimes hero's quests are different. As you know, I'm sure you got the hero archetype going. Hero.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right. So you want to do good things for the world. You want to be you want to help people succeed. And this is really important. I'm working on a book called Kings and Heroes right now, actually. So I'm really trying to understand this. But the book I just finished, Heroines of Avalon, is more about the heroine's quest, and which is not where you go to slay the dragon. It's where you go to listen to the dragon, and you go to the lakes, and you go to the streams, and you go to the wells, and you go to these places, and you're becoming reflective. And a lot of people will say, well, why does that matter? If what matters is money and success and all these other, it really matters because we need to be whole human beings. And if we can learn to listen, our relationships are going to be better. Our relationships with each other, our relationships with the planet, our relationships with our children, our relationships with ourselves.
Oh yeah.
It flows better. And when we're in right relationship with ourselves and other people, then at that point, when you have your insights and your awarenesses, when you know who you are, then you can go forward into the world and do your hero's quest and succeed. That sets you up for success. If you go charging off and you're not really in right relationship with anything, you're probably just going to fall over somewhere. Dust yourself off and go, oh, it just happened.
Might trip over a tree, right?
Something, right? So they fail again, fail. And you think, okay, well, maybe I need to do this differently. So these things happen. So that's the fun part in this book, this Heroines of Avalon, because I give a lot of exercises on how to go and tap in and find these different mystical qualities and so forth. So. And if you look at a lot of entrepreneurs, or at least the ones I've met on my wild travels, there's usually something to them. They usually have some kind of spiritual spark. They're aligned with something that's deeper than themselves, deeper than their ego, deeper. So they're driven by some kind of, in the Welsh tradition they would call it the gleifiosa, or your inner light. They have that. They have this, I've got this mission. I've got to accomplish it. I need to share this. And, so that would say that's the hero, or the drive of the hero or the heroine.
Oh, yeah, all sorts of light. And it's kind of an interesting thing because it's always the whole reaching out sort of thing, but in this it sounds like it's a more inward journey, just going in into the deeper places. Like, yeah, talking to the dragon, you just massage by the neck, be like, yeah, tell me all you know, dragon.
Yeah, the heroine's dragon. It is. The heroine's journey. It is different, and we're really familiar with the hero's journey. You know, Joseph Campbell talked about it. Just about every movie that you ever see has a hero's journey in it. So my quest was this inner journey, the heroine's journey, the in world. So the dragon in the British Isles isn't. You think of something that looks like a dinosaur maybe, but that breathes fire. But that's not really what it is in the old sense. In the old sense, the dragon was an awakened part of the earth, and that's where they would, like an acupuncturist reads the meridians that are in a body, and they'll take acupuncture needles and they'll stick them on these places, these acupuncture points, to help your kidneys or your liver or your stomach, whatever. So they help the body with these little needles. It doesn't make any sense, but it seems to be very effective. So in the old sense, that's what people would do with the ley lines. They would go, oh, this is a part of the earth where the dragon is sleeping. Let's wake her up, or so we're going to wake up the earth energy. So you'd put a standing stone there, or you would go to another part and you go, oh, this is where the dragon energy is very active. Let's put a temple here, so that when we call to our ancestors, or when we do our collective dreaming, this is where we need to be. This is like having a telephone for the other side, and then it's neat actually. If you go look at how they built these things, and then there'll be other ones where, oh no, this is a place that's healthy for living. So they were very attuned to where you should live, where you should not live. There are certain places that'll make you sick if you live there, but you would go to journey there, to have dreams there. And they're very interesting. If you go back, the Welsh stories too, these ones, the Mabinogion, and then as Heroines of Avalon goes on, I move into Arthurian legend, which is more known. When I began with Legends of the Grail, some of those stories are 10,000 years old. They're stories of the Cailleach, the old woman of the world. Those are very ancient stories. And then as it moves forward, we wound up in Arthurian legend. And I felt it was really important to retell the story of a woman named Dindrana, or Dindrain, who was actually the first person to achieve the Holy Grail. And she's hardly ever mentioned. I mean, you've got the round table with all 150 knights. But I thought, well, where's Dindrana? She actually was the first one that did the deed, So she's usually called the unnamed sister of Percival. And I thought, why is she unnamed? That doesn't really make any sense. So anyway, we went back and found her name and traced her and her activity with Percival. So in the stories, I'll give in a lot of the old abbeys, they would write these stories down, the folktale stories. They would write them down, so they're preserved. But quite often there's an agenda with the story, so they'll demonize. Usually the women are demonized in some way.
Horrible.
Oh, thanks. So you have to kind of take the demonization part off and go back and look at what they were actually up to. And so I was able to trace her back and her how they were raised in the forest, and the mother really tried to keep them away from the knights. Her husband was killed as a knight, and so she didn't want her children to follow that path. But of course, if it's in your DNA, what are you going to do? You're going to go search for the Holy Grail, because that's what's happening. And so she goes to this place. So in the Arthurian legend, there's a problem, and it actually relates to what's happening now on the planet. And it's very interesting if you look at the parallel, because the Earth had gone into chaos. There were droughts, there were floods, there were storms, And they call that the period of the wasteland. And it means that the masculine and feminine energies are out of balance. We've stopped listening. We've stopped going to the sacred sites. We've stopped listening to the land. So everything's out of balance. We're out of balance and harmony. And so there's a call. So the call for the Holy Grail is actually the call to balance and unity for the earth. And so each person, each of the 150 knights, and the knights are women as well as men, but each one in their dreaming remembers what their particular role is in restoring the balance and harmony of life in the world. And so they ride off seeking that. And there are all kinds of things that happen on the adventures. Most of the ones about King Arthur are quite well known. You know, his sword, Excalibur, and then he's given another sword. And so he has to ride into the underworld. And they're wonderful action stories. But Dendrana's was a little bit different. She actually had to heal the leprous maiden. And the only way to do that was to give her blood, her blood for this woman. So it had to be the blood of a virgin in that particular tale. So she has to fill a cup for they're strange, because you're thinking 5th century. But anyway, so in doing that, in being of selfless service, basically is the idea of being of selfless service. She opens the gates to Saros, which means she allows the gates of heaven to open to the earth. So it's really lovely. It's a really lovely tale, and it opens the way for the next woman, Grail, that was a Grail champion, whose name is Elaine, who becomes the mother of the great hero Galahad. And but her thing is that she has to hold the Grail until the correct knight comes, who's to be the father of her child. And she has to stand in a boiling pool for 5 years holding this Grail.
Ouch.
Have you had relationships or just times like that where it does really feel like a boiling pool? Like,
Should have had an ice bath instead.
Right? There's this ongoing joke, like, okay, this is the boiling pool week, But she does, she gets through it. She endures, and anyway, she becomes the mother of the greatest of all of the knights, the shining Galahad. So they're fun tales.
Oh yeah, fun and fun indeed. And I already answered my next question. Like, all right, so we had the first lady, had the Holy Grail. Who was the second? And man, she had to go through a trial. Oh man.
She did. That was quite the trial. But she had support. She had Dame Brisbane, who's kind of a female Merlin. She had Dame Brisbane with her. She has different people with her that help. But I think in the days of when the bards, now we have TV, and movies and so forth. But in the old days, everything was passed through oral storytelling. If you understood what your lineage had been through, you understood the stories of your people. Then when you yourself face a difficulty in your life, then you would say, oh, I remember Elaine. She had to go through this, but if I just persevere, I'll make it through. And that's really the point of the stories, is that they each hold a little cup of wisdom for us.
All the puns intended, huh?
Yes. A little Grail, reach of you.
Yes, indeed. It was kind of interesting when you mentioned about the Holy Grail and it kind of being a way to bring balance back, and it just made me think, like, wait, maybe that's the Holy Grail of life that a lot of people want, is just that harmony in a way of just both energies together, like the whole yin yang in a way, the light and dark, the masculine and feminine, just balancing both energies.
Yes. Yeah, it's not choosing one. It's really understanding all the different sides and bringing all of it into balance. And I mean, we can see that domination and control doesn't really work. Yes, you need to protect your borders. That's important, and that's part of the hero's quest. But you don't, you also have to know. You also have to know who sits at the round table, who holds what energies. Everybody needs to find their rightful place. And if people can't find their rightful place in the world, if they can't access their own wisdom, their own, the journey that each person on the planet is a very special being. They're all here. Every single being is here for a reason. And so the idea is that each one of these beings has to find this way of expressing and knowing, and share that. Because if you don't do that, you start to die basically inside. You just start to fade and become depressed, and you wonder why any of it matters, right?
And that is true. That is true. Just lying on the bed of regret and just disappointment.
Mm-hmm. And that's the time to, when you're laying there going, why am I here? That's the time to go on that quest, the heroine's quest or the hero's quest, either one. It's time to go on the quest to find out, oh, okay, I get it, I remember. Because you're in a state, usually, when I did my degree in psychology, they say when you're depressed, it's your soul calling to you. And so then that's the time to go and listen. Oh, what have I forgotten? Oh, what is the message that's trying to come to me? Oh, okay. And it can seem a little crazy, and it's okay. In the Celtic tradition, there's a whole tradition where they would write out, like one of them, Lancelot or somebody, Sweeney, would go into the forest. Merlin even spent a year in the forest mad, because they were kind of becoming unglued, and when they come back, they have new insights and awareness, and they come back as leaders. And I thought that was so interesting, that there was a place made in that culture where you would break and then come back whole.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. That's right. Come back whole.
Yeah.
Holy.
Well, like very true, right? You come back wholly. You tap into God in some way, probably.
That's right. With the soul calling, it's like it could be calling the soul, and it could be Tyrone. That could be his name too.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be anything. Could be, great oak. Actually, Druid meant people of the oaks, because they used the oak trees for their journeying. And you can see when you follow. This is the cool thing about being a mythologist, actually, because you go back and you look at stories that are 10,000 years old, and those stories are mostly earth-based. And you talk about the old women of the world, and they're very interested in death and life, death, and rebirth. So in the cycles of that, so they have an 8-wheel calendar, and they follow it. They track it perfectly. If you go to some of these places, these long barrows, they're perfectly aligned, north, south, east, west. And they didn't have a compass. They just knew. And then, like, one long barrow just went to recently, when you come out, you see the Milky Way at night. If you do it at night, you see this Milky Way like a rainbow, like in the night sky, as you come out of the long barrow, because they would really pay attention to these things. How am I aligned? And if my loved one dies and they come out of this long barrow, we would want to make sure that they have a perfect alignment as they fly, back into the stars from which they came. So they're very beautiful. And then you can see as time goes on, then there are different gods and goddesses that become important for that time. You have the Tuatha De Danann in Ireland, and then you have some really strong characters like Cuchulainn of Morhavna, and then Fenna the Fianna. They still use he's still a very famous character, Fenna the Fianna. And then Lu, the god of light, kind of travels all the way through too. So they always worship this God of light. And then, so when Jesus comes in, it fits perfectly with the Celtic mythology because or the way of thinking, because he comes in as the God of light, and so he's very embraced into the culture quite easily. And then finally, about the 5th century, maybe third to 5th century, people start writing things down. The monks come. St. Patrick came to Ireland and wrote. In fact, when St. Patrick was there, there was a golden age happening in Ireland, while there was the dark ages were happening all through Europe. So that's one of the reasons a lot of bodies of work were actually kept. So our lovely St. Patrick, who's celebrated on the goddess Bamba's day, which I was never quite sure about. I was like, did he usurp that? But anyway.
Well, I think he did.
He might have. But anyway, I'm sure he must have been an incredible character. Incredible man, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's right. You mentioned Druids as well, so there's also a Neo-Druid movement?
Yeah. Actually, I joined it. I thought it was really interesting, or it is interesting. They're called the Obods. There were some fellows at Cambridge and Oxford. They call it Oxbridge, who decided that these indigenous people of the British Isles and Ireland were really, that they actually held some spiritual wisdom that had been forgotten. And there had been a lot of propaganda about them because Caesar came and said, when the Roman invasion happened, he said, "Oh, these Druids, they do human sacrifice and they do all of this stuff and they need to be wiped out." And as it turns out, there was only one sacrifice anyone has ever found, so it was probably propaganda and untrue. They were really much more like. The Druids were much more like the priests of in India, the Brahmin priests. And so they were like the spiritual leaders of that kind of indigenous time. So Merlin, the character Merlin, that we know so well, the magician, the wizard, and Gandalf, he'll appear in Lord of the Rings as Gandalf. Right? So we think of the Druids as that sort of character. He would have come out of that tradition. And there were female Druids also. They weren't even called Druidesses. It was okay if that was your calling, you could do that. But there was a huge training. You had to learn 250 stories of your people, which would take years to gather all the folklore and learn all these things. You had to do all of that. But if you think about it, it's great because it means that you really understood your history. You really understood the events. And then, if you could really do that, you could become an ovate. And an ovate is what I'm talking about with the heroine's journey. It's where you learn to listen. So you really, people go, "Are you crazy?" It's like, no, not really. I'm just listening. I'm listening deeply to the dreams of the earth. So they would become like the prophetesses and the seers and so forth, and which were important in those times because you needed to know if an ice storm was coming, or you needed to know if the Vikings were going to invade. So that was important. And then after 20 years of that, you could maybe become a Druid. And the Druids were the ones who learned the secrets of the trees. And by that, they learned to walk into other worlds, so they could go into the lower world of the Noon, or they go into the upper world of Sigant. And they became the wise ones who understood the blueprints of humanity and how it all functioned. So they're really fun. They're really fun, interesting characters. And I mean, the Neo-Druid movement, everybody goes and you talk about this and they celebrate it. It's not quite the same thing exactly, but I like it because there's this revival of the Celtic traditions with a scholarly part to it because people were trying to figure out what the truth is and how it works. as well as this mythopoetic sense. So yeah, it's a fun movement.
Oh yeah, fun on the bun. If only podcasts were invented back then. It's like, yeah, 250 stories, I got you.
you know what it is? It's like the old-fashioned podcast. That's exactly what it is.
It's like, easy. I got you. 250 stories. Oh man, I'm gonna be a master 25 days. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, after 250 stories that you knew how to tell really well, that you could sing. You had to be able to play a harp, Now we just have background music, but anyway. So yeah.
Sounds pretty hypnotizing to me.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. These things are very fun, and they lead you back. People go, well, why does it matter? But every single one of us has a mother and a father and grandmothers and grandfathers, and we all have a lineage that leads somewhere. And most of us are pretty mixed. And who knows? Maybe we all go back to the same origin eventually. But I think when we understand first of all, that our ancestors, our grandmothers and grandfathers, loved us enough to bring us here, that life is a gift, and the fact that we're sitting here is really pretty miraculous, and that we really want to use it each day the best we possibly can. And when we take time to thank our ancestors, I think it's very powerful. Even if maybe we didn't even have a great relationship with them, it doesn't matter. There was enough love that came from them that keeps us alive today. And then we can throw that energy into the future for our children and grandchildren and so forth. And so that feeling of this the flow of life as it continues on this wave that wants us to thrive no matter what. We have all these crazy things that always seem to be that always threaten us. But if we look throughout history, there have always been crazy things that have threatened us with extinction or whatever. They've always been there, and we've always managed to work through it and carry on. And so when you go back and you're looking at 10,000-year-old history, you can see, gosh, there were ice ages, and the Earth doesn't stay the same. There are times when, and some of the stories say that Ireland was warm once upon a time. So things have changed. The Earth changes. She just does. That's part of what she does. And I think instead of trying to dominate and control it, if we try to listen to the dragon, right, try to understand the dragon, then I think we can thrive. It's just easier for us. Well, not only that, we can survive. We can figure out how to work with it, the energies that are happening.
That's right. Mother Earth changes her hairdo every 1,000 years or so.
She does. She does. We just hope we don't fly off while she's doing it.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, oh, man, maybe that's why Elon Musk is trying to get folks to Mars. Okay.
Okay, here. Toss us through that direction, yeah. Yeah, it's true. Oh, my goodness. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, and it's the question that every guest gets to answer. So if you were to wake up tomorrow and you were 25 at this time in the current year of 2019, of all of your amassed knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
And I was 25?
Yep, you get to wake up and you're 25 again, so you basically are 2 years younger.
Right, exactly. 25. You don't realize when you're 25, or at least for me, I was so fit and so healthy and so strong and so sharp, and I figured that would always be that way. And the thing is, it's not. So you really want to enjoy, you really, really want. So my advice to my 25-year-old self would be this: never forget your wondrous inner child. Never forget to ask questions. Always follow your heart. And if you throw the light of your heart into the future and ask, you make a prayer, you ask for help, it will always come to you.
Oh, Oh, yeah. That's right. That inner child. Just put the propeller hat on when you wake up every day. That's right.
Right? Have a giggle, ask some questions, and just there's something about just being playful that really helps. You feel, you can feel it yourself. You kind of get this frown.
Oh, yeah.
Or you can just knock that off and just go out and look at the wind and the trees and the birds flying and just go, gosh, I don't know what's going to happen today. This could be the best day ever.
That's right. And that's the attitude to have. Best day ever. The BDE. That's right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. That's right. It's great having you on.
Yeah.
That's right. And the good news is it ain't even over yet, because there's more that awaits, more books and more interviews and more of everything else.
Oh, it's still flowing. I'm working on a couple more right now. I've actually just finished a children's book about a dragon that should come out before too long. She goes
Sweet.
She goes on a quest to find the dragon so she can save the world. So we just finished that. It was just illustrated by Belcro Ducray. And I have all kinds of stories. There's some that are really more geared for adults, which are these two, Legends of the Grail and Heroines of Avalon. And then there's some, I wrote a whole Sparkle series for children. And my bestseller is A Story of Becoming. And it's actually the story about a tree told from the tree's perspective. And you think, well, what does a tree know? But she knows a lot. She's an apple tree, and first she has to discover who she is, and then she gets eaten by deer, so she has to come back again, and then she gets struck by lightning, and then she becomes miraculous. In the indigenous traditions, they say if a tree's struck by lightning, that means it's a miracle tree. And on it goes. She keeps becoming stronger, more powerful, and the whole idea. I think the reason it won 18 literary awards, and it's been a bestseller on Amazon for ages. And I feel one reason that people love it so much is that they can relate to that. Like you're going really strong, and then boom, something happens. And then you have to get back up, and then you go along again. But as you get older, maybe I need to say something to my 97-year-old self too, as well as my 25-year-old self, which is like, okay, you might get a little bent or a little slow, but you become wiser. There's wisdom there. There's something more to share. There's something in that journey of that lifetime experience that if we don't get bitter, if we learn from the lessons, if we learn from the experiences, then then we might look a little funny, but we've got magical apples. We've got things to share, So.
Oh yeah, and the apples are probably multicolored too.
Yeah. Well, they can be. I think they can be. All your colors, your rainbows, your gemstones. In that particular book, she goes from being a red apple tree to a golden apple tree, but
yes.
Yeah. So that's good.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks a bunch for your listening ears, and it's time now because it's here. Book number 2 is finally here. Stay the Course. The Elite Performers, 7 Keys to Sustainable Success. And you can pre-order your ebook copy today by heading over to Amazon.com and pressing that Buy Now button for only 99 cents. It is a low-cost investment in advancing yourself into your greatness. So go ahead to Amazon.com, type in Stay the Course. Look for the book with the big fat red letters, Stay the Course, and the compass pointing north. And yours truly, Dominic Brightman, is the author. And I thank you in advance for all that you do. Go out there and dominate.